Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. Chapter number 21 The Letter. As I walked into the inn, Floggin was sitting in his favorite chair by the fire, and Kylie was showing Rob and Steve the map on the wall and telling them how we got our bears and how Chili met his girlfriend. I opened a new box of cigars, even though I had one open in my desk, and walked up to Kylie and offered. First cigar out of the box. Cadet? Why, thank you, Sergeant. That's twice you've honored me with that. Kylie smiled as she took the first cigar. This time you earned it, I said, and offered my boys each a cigar. Everyone lit up, and Martha, who had the kitchen door open so she could at least hear everyone, came out saying, If you're going to be smoking those things in my inn, I'm closing the kitchen door. You're not going to ruin my food, she said and closed the door. We all chuckled. Did I hear someone say he was paying for the drinks? I asked, leaned a bit to my left, looking directly at Floggin. I said I would pay for them, not pour them. Kylie, Floggin said. Oh, and Kylie, my decanter of rum and a glass, please. Floggin asked. Roberts stepped over to Floggin and asked, Sir, would you mind if I joined you? My father was an old salt, too. It's been a long time since I've had a rum. Kylie, 2 glasses, please, Floggin requested. Traitor, Steve said, while laughing and looking at Rob. Then I and Kylie both laughed. Steve and I headed to the bar as Rob sat beside Floggin, and Kylie served everyone and came back to the bar to pour herself an ale and smoke her cigar. So, read the letter, Sarge. Everyone's here, and don't forget, I've been hanging on to that thing for a week. I'm dying to know what's in it, Steve requested. All right. Martha? I yelled. Martha came out of the kitchen. There's no ceremony going on now, Sergeant. I'll thank you not to yell in my inn, she said sternly. I'm about to read a letter from the king. Would you like to hear it? I asked. Oh, just let me turn the stakes. 1 minute, Sergeant, please, she said, and I nodded. Rob looked at Steve and said, Steaks. And Steve smiled and nodded. You boys not eating well? I asked. And Rob answered saying, New cook at the barracks, lots of beans and goat liver. You boys should have joined the Navy, best chefs in the service, Floggin chimed in with pride. Martha came running in and stood behind Floggin. Okay, Sergeant, I'm ready, she said. Martha, dear, be sure to give Roberts and Stevens the 2 biggest steaks. Seems their cook is starving the lads, Floggin said with a smile. They were getting them anyway. Now hush up. Go on, Sergeant, Martha said eagerly. Hold on. I'm just reading it through. His Majesty may say a few things in a personal letter he does not want public, I said. Okay, I stood in the center of the room so all could hear, and begun. Dear Sergeant, you have no idea how good it feels to put pen to paper for pleasure instead of work. Once I realized your letter was of a personal nature and not a world catastrophe, I kicked everyone out of the royal courtroom and ordered a jug of wine and read your letter over and over. P.S. You owe His Majesty a new throne. When I read about your mother giving Chili hot peppers and locking him in the barn, I laughed so hard, I spilled wine all over myself and my throne. Oh, that is a good story, Kylie said. Shh! From everyone, I continued. If you're reading this, Sergeant, that means the 2 idiots you call friends are still alive, and hopefully my carriage is still in one piece. And so I don't have to hear some lame story on how one of my prize carriages threw a wheel. Tell them they have my permission to spend the night. Make sure they pay Mr. Floggin 20 gold apiece for their rooms. It can't be easy running an inn in these lean times. Wine them and dine them, Sergeant, and pat them on the head and send them off to bed, and hopefully they will be joined by your ward in the morning to return to the palace. Stevens tossed Floggin a purse of gold. From His Majesty, he said, I continued. About your ward, Sergeant, I know you requested no special treatment, but I just had to get a look at the young lady you described in your letter. Before she sacks one of my garrisons, steals one of my griffins, and forces me to accept her allegiance to me at sword point in my bedchamber. Being a ward of yours, I thought the carriage would definitely save lives. I looked at Kylie and smiled, then continued. Since the semester does not start at the academy for another 2 weeks, she'll be my guest here at the palace for a week or so before she is shipped off to the academy. Heaven help us all. Hear that, Kylie? You're going to meet the king. From Floggin. Oh my! From Martha with her hand on her heart. Not just meet him, Floggin. Spend a week with him, I said and turned to Kylie. Ask him to go for ice cream. His Majesty likes ice cream, I said, and Kylie nodded with a big smile. I turned and continued. Speaking of the academy, you said you stopped to see Captain Niles in your travels, and I was wondering if you ever knew I had the biggest crush on her when I was at the academy. She was my riding instructor. Oh, I could watch her bounce in that saddle all day. I stopped. And that is all I'm reading of that paragraph, gentlemen. There are ladies present. But Kylie, see, the king went to the academy too, I said, and continued. Your friend Captain Parker was here in court last week, bragging on his victory over the orcs in the Redridge Mountains. I say, they all caught a cold and went sniffling home to Mommy, but to hear him tell it, you would think he put his sword through the whole battalion himself. But he did tell an amusing story about you traumatizing one of his young guards by making him brush Chili's teeth and cleaning a bucket of blood from his mouth. I always thought Chili looked rather good with orc lipstick myself. Everyone had a chuckle, and I continued. Speaking of heroes, did you know you were paying lodging to one? The name Floggin from your letter sounded familiar, so I asked the royal historian if he knew why, and he told me a story. A story I remember my father telling to me as a bedtime story when I was very young. Shall I tell it to you? Okay, you've convinced me. I walked over and stood in front of Floggin, holding the letter in front of me. Kingsguard, here by me, please, I said, and all three put down their drinks and stood beside me. Then I continued. It seems there was a young Lieutenant Floggin on the HMS Elwyn as the ship's navigator, during a heated battle with what remained of the Orcs' Western Armada. The ship was getting in a spot of trouble. More men were dropping from sickness rather than bullets. Running to the helm, the young lieutenant found the whole league of officers there sick, dead, or dying, ordering sailors to take the officers below and care for them. He steered the ship into a sea-bound fog just as the Orcs' reinforcements arrived. Hiding in the fog overnight while his shipmates dropped one by one, with the dawn he made a beeline straight for Stormwind. Not knowing what caused the sickness, for 3 days and nights in rough seas, and with no one to trim the sails, he stood on that deck with no food or water, and only a single-shot pistol that he would threaten anyone with, should they dare step on the helm deck. With Stormwind in sight and yelling for someone to trim the sails, because they were coming in too fast. The young lieutenant made his best guess at the docks at tied off the wheel and ran from the back of the ship to the front, cutting down the sails and dropping anchor, and stopping one of my biggest ships 3 inches from the dock. Then, to get immediate help, the young lieutenant fired a shot at the palace. It worked. In seconds, a platoon of guards was there to pull off the dead and dying remainder of the crew and get them medical aid. And to this day, Sergeant, that shot still remains the only friendly fire shot ever to hit the palace. Is that not a great story? And if Mr. Floggin is there, please thank him for his service and for the memory of my father for me. King's Guard, attention, salute. Lieutenant, on behalf of His Majesty the King, we would like to thank you for your service and providing a story not told by just one king, but 2, I said with pride. Floggin stood and returned the salute, then sat and wiped his eyes and said, His Majesty is very kind, and so are you, Sergeant. I nodded to tell everyone to go sit down, and I continued. Anyway, old friend, there are royal pains in the ass, clearing their throats at me, insisting I get back to work. Perhaps I will come up this fall, and I and Chili can take Mr. Floggin hunting. I should very much like to meet him. Tell Chili, of the 2 of you, I love him best. Warmest regards, His Royal Majesty, Anduin Wrynn. I finished, and everyone clapped. Rob sat beside Floggin and said, Lieutenant, that cannonball is still stuck in the wall right over the library, sir. Then Stephen said, Kylie, forget the ice cream. You should ask the king to gather his guard under that ball and tell that story. That's a very good idea, Steve, I said. Okay, I will. Okay, Daddy? Kylie asked. Floggin nodded, still wiping his eyes. In hopes of getting a laugh out of Floggin, I said, Here, Floggin, another thing for your wall, only if you want to keep your head. I'd black out the paragraph about Captain Niles and where His Majesty calls the royal court pains in the ass. I said, smiling, and handed him the letter. Chuckling, Floggin said. I will, thank you, Sergeant, as he took the letter. Oh, the stakes! Martha yelled and ran into the kitchen. Floggin stood up and said, I'd say that means dinner ready, everyone. Go wash up. And lit his pipe. I was the last to arrive for dinner, for I had the furthest to go to wash up. The inn was full of voices and laughter. Floggin was at the head of the table with Steve on my side to his right, Kylie to his left, and scrunched in beside her was Rob, and Martha was standing behind her chair, smiling, happy to see her table full. It was apparent she was a woman who wished for a large family, but the gods were not kind. Well, Martha, I thought to myself, with Kylie in the King's Guard Academy, you will have over 20,000 young men and women you can fuss over. And I smiled. Oh, there you are, Sergeant. Over here by me. I'll go get your steak, Martha said as she waved me over. I sat and greeted everyone. Kylie, has Leal Sargent been taken care of today? I asked. Oh, yes, Sergeant. I took his socks off, put his ball away, and sent him hunting before I came in to wash up, Kylie said. My socks! Floggin insisted. Oh, Daddy, you don't want them back. They're all stretched out and full of grass stains, Kylie said. Martha came in with my plate, put it in front of me, poured me wine, and sat and ate her own supper. Well, your very first pay, young lady, you will be mailing me 2 good pairs of winter socks, Floggin ordered, shaking a fork full of bear steak at his daughter. I get paid, from Kylie, and we all laughed. Speaking of mailing, Martha said, if I put your boys' names on packages and mail them to the palace, you'll get them? She asked. Yes, Mum, from Rob and Steve. And you boys like smoked bear, pickles, jams, and jellies? She asked. Oh, yes, Mum. Again from both Rob and Steve as they looked at each other smiling. Don't be going giving away our preserves before they're even grown. From Floggin, Martha banged her fork on the table. Those boys helped build that garden, and they will be getting a package of its labors every winter's festival for as long as I am alive, Mr. Floggin. We all looked at Floggin, who gave a huff and went back to his steak. I looked at Rob and Steve and smiled and said, Welcome to the family. And we all laughed. And you, Kylie, where do I send your packages? Martha asked. Oh, just send them to the palace, Martha. The academy is in a secret location known by only King's Guards, and only a few of them, for security reasons, I said while eating my steak. But don't worry, the academy mail is a high priority, I said, looking at her and smiling. She nodded her head and went back to her dinner. After dinner, we all sat around with our bellies extended, smoking a cigar and drinking an ale, except for Floggin, who had his pipe and rum. After the dishes were done, Martha came out of the kitchen. If you boys are going to be spending another week on the road, you're all getting a good scrubbing, she said. And that includes you, young lady, she said, pointing at Kylie. Aw, Mom, from Kylie. I'll go last. Rob needs it more, Mom, Kylie said. Hey, from Rob, all offended. Okay, you, let's go, Martha said as she rubbed Rob's head. Take a mug of ale with you, Rob. You'll need it, I said, chuckling as they went up the stairs. Steve asked, Am I missing something here? Martha is famous for her thorough scrub downs. She gave Chili one, and he came back looking like he was run over by a herd of mammoth, I said. But the next morning he was jumping around like a young cub. Mom scrubs you hard, but the next morning you feel 10 years younger, Kylie said, shaking her head. Surely you 3 big tough King's Guard commandos aren't afraid of a little old woman, are you? Floggin said with a chuckle in his voice. We all looked at each other and then at Floggin and in unison said, Yes. Yes, we are. And everyone started laughing. Well, if I'm next, I'm going to need something a little stronger than Al. Lieutenant, could I trouble you for some of that rum? Steve asked. As usual, Navy to the rescue. Give us your mug, son, Floggin said as he filled Steve's mug. You went to the Naval Academy, didn't you, Floggin? I asked. I did. My father worked his whole life to buy me 1 year. The rest I had to work for with grants and bursaries. Thanks to being your ward, Kylie won't have to do that. But still, I'd rather hold down a job and go to school than face the training she's going to go through, Floggin said, stuffing his pipe. Steve went and sat beside Floggin and said, An award of Sergeant Zartz. People are going to be testing you just to see how tough you are, Stevens warned. I'm ready, Kylie said confidently. Yes, you are, I said. Would you like to hear a story about your sweet older brother? Steve asked. Kylie nodded her head. It was in basic training. Hell Week was just over, so our squad was healing up and resting our sore muscles and happy we made it through. At 4 a.m, the Sarge here came into the barracks dressed in full gear with a 90-pound pack on his back and yelled, Everyone has exactly 3 minutes to look exactly like me. Lifting the foot of our bunks and dropping them on the floor with most of us still in them. We scrambled, got on our gear and our packs, and stood at attention at the foot of our bunks. Gentlemen, we are going to loosen up those sore muscles with a 20-mile hike, and I expect to be back here before breakfast, so double time move. And we ran, and every mile he made us stop and do 400 sit-ups and push-ups. Around the 18th mile, I hit the ground puking. He grabbed my arm, threw it around his shoulder, and kept me running as I puked all over myself and him saying, "If you make me miss my breakfast, Stevens, you will be in a world of shit." We'd stop every mile, he'd throw me to the ground and put his huge arm under my throat and choke me till I did a push-up, 400 times. Then he'd wrap his vice-like hand around my head and pull me to my knees, making me do a sit-up. After about 20 of those, I felt as if I would pass out, but somehow I said, "I got this, Sarge," and started doing the sit-ups on my own. My entire body was screaming at me to quit, but if I did, Sarge would kill me right there and then. We got back to the barracks, and the whole squad was just running right into the chow hut, and Sarge stopped me and said, "You're not eating until you clean my uniform," and stripped down to his skivvies and boots and threw his puke-soaked uniform at me, then went into chow in his boots and underwear. "That's your sweet sergeant. Sergeant Zart, the death cart." Steve finished his story and took another gulp of rum. "You still remember that?" I asked. "Remember it. I have nightmares of it," Steve said, chuckling. Martha yelled down from the top of the stairs. "Okay, Steven, your turn." Steve finished his rum, gave us all a salute, and headed up the stairs. The rest of the night was mostly spent preparing Kylie and making a list of what little she needed to bring. We were not surprised in the least to learn Rob and Steve both hit the sack after Martha was done, and so did Kylie. Martha asked me to grab 2 roasts out of the smokehouse. She wanted to make a basket of goodies for everyone for the trip. Later, she came out to the stables to test fit a collar she was almost finished on Lil Sargent, and she asked if I could stall everyone for about an hour in the morning so she could finish it. I agreed. And then I headed to bed for the night. Morning came, and we all joined up at the breakfast table. Everyone was praising Martha for her rejuvenating deep scrub, and thanked her for having everyone's uniform, even the one I borrowed from Steve, freshly washed and pressed. "I've made a basket for you boys and Kylie for your trip," Martha announced. "A little something for each of you and a lot of everything else to share. Stephen, a huge thermos of bear stew sweetie, and Robert, 5 pounds of bear sausages and a bottle of mustard. Love. And Kylie, your fajitas you like, baby. There's also a roast to share and a gallon of my potato salad and bread. Also 3 jars of my peach jelly, one of which I want to make it to His Majesty. See to that, Kylie," Martha ordered. "I will, Mom." Kylie smiled. "And here, sweetie, I wrapped up a smoked roast for your bear," Martha said. "No, thank you, Mom. When we stop along the way, he can find his own food," Kylie said. I looked at Kylie and nodded with pride. "Don't starve the poor thing," Martha said, concerned. "No, I won't, Mom. I've got 2 foxes worth of dried fox jerky as training strips. If he can't hunt where we stop, he'll damn well work for his food," Kylie said. "You're not too big to go over my knee, young lady. You watch your words around your mother," Floggin warned. "Sorry, Mom." From Kylie. And Martha kissed her on the head. Rob held his napkin in front of his mouth and said, "Oh, don't blame her, Lieutenant, sir. I think she's been hanging out with Sarge too much." "What?" I said, all offended. "He's right, Sarge. She sounds like a mini you," Stephen said with a smile. "I don't know how to take that," I said, and everyone laughed. "Oh, Martha, I'll purchase that smoked roast off you if Kylie's not taking it. A gift for a friend," I said. "Take it and welcome, Sergeant," Martha said and handed me the roast. "Cadet, I'm going to give you your first assignment. After I put a note with it, you are to take this roast to Captain Parker at 3 Corners Barracks in the Redridge Mountains on your way to the palace, and keep your bear and these 2 dog faces out of it. You have permission to use your tanto if needed," I said with a very straight face. But Kylie held in a laugh as she said, "Sergeant! Yes, Sergeant!" As breakfast wound down and everyone was packed up and the carriage all loaded, I said, "So, men, you'll have a goodbye cigar and a mug of ale with your old sergeant before you leave? As long as we're out by 10, I'd be honored to," Steve said. I looked at Martha to see if that was enough time for her, and she gave me a subtle nod. Sitting with the boys enjoying our cigars and a mug of ale while we told stories. Kylie took Lil Bear on a breakfast hunt. Martha was doing the dishes, and Floggen disappeared for a while but came back into the inn, wiping off a very old dusty bottle. With his pipe in his mouth, he stood in front of us saying, "Boys, I was saving this for a very special occasion, but I don't think life gets more special than the day your daughter goes off to His Royal Majesty's Guard Academy," he said proudly as he turned the label of the bottle towards us. 20-year-old Navy rum, Floggen said. We all whistled a slow, impressed whistle. "Join me in a toast?" he asked just as Kylie popped in and joined us. Floggen poured us each a glass, and we all held them out as he toasted. "To His Majesty's Navy, His Army, and His Guard, long may they stand, shoulder to shoulder." We all repeated, "Shoulder to shoulder," and drank. "Oh, that's smooth," I said, and everyone agreed. Then Floggen put the cork back in the bottle and handed it to Roberts, saying, "Be sure to save the last drink for your father," and slapped him on the back. "I will, sir. Thank you," Rob said. "While we're giving gifts, here, Kylie, for you and your first squad," I said, and handed Kylie an unopened box of cigars. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'll save them for after Hell Week," she said, and I laughed and said, "That's a very good idea." Then we all laughed. "Well, time to go," Stephen said. "Who's driving?" he continued, looking at Roberts. "Oh, I will," Kylie offered. "Okay, by me, Rob?" Stephen said. Rob nodded, and Kylie said, "Yay!" "Do you have the roast, Kylie?" I asked. "Sergeant, under the rear seat in the carriage with your note facing up that reads, 'Sorry, old friend, it wouldn't fit on an arrow. To be delivered to Captain Parker at 3 Corners, Sergeant.'" "That's fine, Kylie. Thank you," I said. "Attention." And all 3 came to attention as I did a walk around each to say goodbye. But walking around Kylie with her bow on her back and 2 sets of quivers, I asked, "Cadet, would you do an old sergeant a favor and leave your magic arrows here with your father till you graduate?" Kylie saluted, then took off her black quiver and gave them to her father. Floggen nodded, and Kylie returned to attention. "Guard!" I yelled. "King's Guard!" returned proudly all 3. "Dismissed!" I ordered. And we all hugged and shook hands as Martha came running out of the kitchen. "Wait, Kylie, for your bear!" Martha had made the most beautiful fox fur collar with the fur on the inside and dyed black with gold trim and writing that said, "Lil Sergeant Big Paw Floggen." "Oh, it's beautiful, Mom. Thank you," Kylie said. "So that's what the black hair dye was for." Floggen chuckled. "It truly is outstanding, Martha," I said. "Mom, I want you to put it on him," Kylie said, and handed Martha the collar. She took it, and we all went outside. Lil Sergeant was lying in his favorite spot by the door. Martha went down 2 stairs to be level with him and said, "Sit up," and he did. Then she showed him his collar. "Do you see this, Lil Sergeant? Do you know what it says? What it means?" Martha asked. "Yearn," from Lil Sergeant. "It says, 'Lil Sergeant Big Paw Floggen,' and it means no matter where you go, what you do, you will always be a part of this family and always have a home here." She took the collar and clasped it around his neck and fussed over it a bit before she said, "Now you tell the other animals your grandmother made this for you, and if they give you a hard time, I'll turn them into a stew." And she nodded. Lil Sergeant yearned and put his huge front paws on her shoulders and licked her face. We all had a good laugh and said goodbye. Kylie jumped up in the driver's seat, and Stephen said, "Sorry, big fella, but Lil Sergeant's right on top of the carriage," as he picked him up and managed to hoist him onto the roof. Lil Sergeant plopped himself down right behind Kylie and started licking the back of her head, like Chili used to do to me. Rob and Steve got in and stuck themselves out the window, saying, "Lieutenant, Martha, Sarge, it was nice." "Hee-yow!" from Kylie sent the boys flying against the back seat as the carriage took off like a shot. Martha went back in the inn, and I turned to follow, and Floggen stopped me, putting his arm around my shoulder, making me face the carriage as it took off, and said, "You and I have an accord, Sergeant, but Kylie never did apologize for the pipe prank." Just then a loud twang! As a tripcord pulled tight and broke, and as they drove off, a large blue banner that said in big white letters, "Navy," unfurled itself down the back of the carriage as it disappeared down the road. Laughing, I said, "Oh, when she sees that Floggen, she's going to be mad." "I'm counting on it, Sergeant," he said as he stuffed his pipe and smiled at me. "Now, Sergeant," he said as he lit his pipe, "if either of us steps through that door, we'll be on our knees planting seeds all day. I put my shotgun in the chicken shed last night. Fox hunting." "You're a very wise man, Floggen. I'll get my bow," I said and smiled and patted him on the back as we both headed around the inn to the backyard. Floggen and I spent the rest of that morning fox hunting in a little meadow he showed me about a half-mile from the inn. As we started our hunt about 20 yards apart and walking through the meadow, I spotted the first one and put an arrow through the back of its head, and as I leaned down to pick it up, out of the corner of my eye, the grass moved in front of Floggen. "Floggen!" I said and pointed. "Boom! Boom!" And as I was tucking in my fox to my quiver strap under my arm, Floggen held up his first one and put it into his bag at his side. Cupping my hands over my mouth, I yelled, "Took you too!" laughing. Well, it was on then. Floggen would not use both barrels again for the rest of the day. By mid-afternoon, the score 3-2 for Floggen. Floggen came up to me and said, "Well, that's it for me, Sergeant. I've got to go into town and get some glass for those frames I'm building. Need anything?" he asked. "No, thank you," I said. "I make it 3-2. He said as he took the 2 foxes off my side and threw them into his bag. "Guess I'm a greater killer than a Kingsguard," he said with a smile and lighting his pipe. "Today you are, Floggen," I said, chuckling. "Tell you what, for your victory, I'll gut and skin and tan all the foxes, if I can have the tails," I offered. "Done," he said and handed me the bag as we headed back to the inn. "What do you want to be done with the meat feed for your goats?" I asked as we walked. "Oh, no, Sergeant. Give them to Martha. Nothing better than her fox and potato soup," he insisted. "Fox and potato soup?" I asked, as my stomach started to wobble at the thought of it. "Don't knock it till you've tried it, Sergeant. It is one of her best dishes. Tell her I asked if she'd make us some tonight for supper when you give her the foxes," Floggen said. "I'll try anything once," I said with a chuckle. "I should think it will become a favorite at first taste, Sergeant," he said as we continued our walk. Arriving at the inn, Floggen handed me his shotgun, jumped on his mount, and was off. I took the shotgun inside, unloaded it, and leaned it against the fireplace. Then through the kitchen and out the back door, and snuck past Martha, who was seeding her garden, and made my way down to the tanning racks. I then took my bear pelt off the rack and thought to myself how it needed a good beating to get off the dust and leaves it had gathered in the few days it was there. I noticed how soft and tender the skin was. The extra salt rubbing Kylie really did pay off. Folded the pelt and put it on a stump while I gutted and skinned the foxes. Then washed and cleaned the skins and stretched them back to back on the 3 racks Kylie and I had built. The salting and tanning would have to wait, as I wanted to get the fox meat to Martha before it turned. Putting the bear pelt and foxtails with my other skins in the stables, I headed over to the garden to talk with Martha and give her the foxes. Arriving at the gate, I yelled, "Martha," and held up the foxes. Martha was all the way at the back row of the garden, stood up, looked at me, and yelled, "Step in the circles." I opened the gate and noticed row after row of circles pressed into the dirt about 6 inches around. I did as she asked and followed the path I needed to get to her. "So that's where you and my lazy husband took off too, fox hunting? You know, if you two had have been here, this garden would have been done hours ago," she said with a tone of disdain in her voice. "Ah, but that's the beauty of a garden, Martha. For one, it's a relaxing hobby. For more, it's a tedious task," I said with a smile. She stood to put her hands on her hips and gave me a huff. That's when I noticed her feet. She had cut herself 2 half-inch thick sections of the birch tree, ran twine through each, and tied them to her feet. "Clever idea," I said and pointed at her feet. "Thank you, Sergeant. Are you here to help?" she asked. "I bring you foxes and a request for fox and potato soup for supper from your lazy husband." I chuckled. "Where is he anyway?" she asked, annoyed. "He ran into town to get glass for his frames," I said. "Well, if I'm to make that soup, it will take the rest of the day," she said, handing me the spade and seed and untying her wooden shoes and taking the foxes, she said. "Finish this last row of pumpkins, 2-inch deep holes, 2 feet apart, 3 seeds in each, and use the shoes," she ordered. "Yes, Mum," I answered with a smile. As she walked away, she said, "Late dinner tonight, Sergeant. Be at the table washed up by 7, please." "Thank you, Martha," I said as I put on the wooden shoes. Supper time came, and I walked into the inn through the front door, washed up and ready to try the soup. I had picked a few wild apples and left them on my desk in the stables just in case. Floggen was sitting at the head of the table smoking his pipe and reading the letter from the king. "I finished tanning those skins, Floggen, and left them on the racks for your approval," I said as I sat at the table. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm sure they're beautiful, he said as he carefully folded the letter and put it in his pocket. I looked down at my placemat, and beside my bowl was a beautiful bracelet made out of woven grayish blonde hair with blue beads all around woven through. What's this? I asked, just as Martha came out of the kitchen with a big cast iron kettle of soup and basket of bread. Taking my bowl to fill it, she said, Kylie told me of your special message arrow. I thought if you ever needed to send a message home, you could use that. Thank you, Martha. That's very thoughtful, I said as I put it gently in my pocket. Martha placed the soup in front of me along with a small loaf of bread and went on to fill flogons and her bowls. With Floggon watching, I took a small taste of the soup. It was thick and creamy and had a wonderful flavor. I took a larger taste this time with a chunk of carrot and fox on my spoon. The fox tasted amazing, not chewy or gamey at all, tender and moist and full of flavor. This soup is amazing. I would have never thought you could eat fox, I said, astonished. Then put my spoon on my placemat, grabbed my bowl with both hands and gulped it down and asked for more. Please. Floggon openly chuckled as he said, I told you. I'm glad you like it, Sergeant, but you will use a spoon at my table, Martha said, taking my bowl and refiling it. Oh, forgive me, Martha. You are a wizard, an absolute genius with food, I said, again astonished. My, such praise. Here, let me pour you a wine, Sergeant, Martha said, handing me my bowl. As I worked on my fourth bowl of soup, a griffin rider came into the inn. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said with a smile. I saw the young lieutenant and stood. Attention, I yelled. As you were, Sergeant, here a message for you from Valdor, he said. Won't you join us for dinner, Lieutenant? Floggon asked. Oh, you really must, Lieutenant. Best food in Azeroth, I said as I opened the letter. Thank you. I will. Oh, and there's a griffin outside for you, Sergeant, from Valdor. Does he not like you, Sergeant? The lieutenant asked. He's one of my best friends. Why? I asked. As the lieutenant tasted his soup, he said, Well, she may be one of our fastest, but she is defiantly not easy to ride, and most definitely not the friendliest of creatures. This is wonderful soup, Mum. May I ask what kind it is? Fox and potato, Martha said, smiling. Fox, you say? The lieutenant said, surprised, and took another mouthful. Holding his napkin in front of his mouth, he said, It's very good, thank you, Mum. Oh, please, Lieutenant, I'm Martha, and that's Mr. Floggon. I opened the letter, and it was one piece of paper that said, Rub me and throw me on the ground. I walked to the center of the inn, and as everyone watched, I rubbed the paper and threw it down. From it, a purple plume of magic, and there was a 2-foot Valdor. Sergeant, bad news. Your friend Nimicie has been kidnapped. I sent a griffin for you and that bloody bear of yours. We all know how he loves to fly. Get your asses back to the palace and come to see me. He disappeared, and the paper caught fire. I quickly picked it up and tossed it into the fireplace. Oh no, your friend, Sergeant, Martha said worriedly. I have every confidence in Nimicie. Still, I better go, I said. Lieutenant, I'll just get my things and ride back with you, I said. Take your time, Sergeant, he said, smiling, holding his bowl out for more soup. I downplayed how worried I was about Nimicie. Truth be known, I was panicked. I ran out to the stables and grabbed everything I needed. My riding bag, a set of buckskins over my clothes, my armor, my short sword, my bow, and my 3 quivers of arrows, putting the magic ones on first so they would be lowest on my back, did a quick check to make sure I had everything I needed. Then grabbed the skins for Martha and ran back into the inn. Coming back into the inn, I put my skins on the front desk and asked Martha to join me. Martha, I should very much like to employ your services as a seamstress, I asked. Bear pelt coat lined with deer skins and stuffed with chicken feathers and foxtail collar and cuffs, I requested. Oh, it will be a beautiful, Sergeant. Who's it for? She asked as she admired the pelts. You, Martha, for a winter's festival gift, I said, smiling. Oh, she exclaimed as she threw herself around my neck and hugged the stuffing out of me. Thank you, Sergeant. Now, don't let Floggon talk you into selling those pelts, I said. He'll be feed for my goats if he tries, she said as she put her hands on her hips and nodded. And here, Martha. I took off my pendant for my battle bear and put it in her hands. I don't know when or if I'll be back, so take care of my battle bear for me. Ride him to church every Sunday and hook him to your plow, to plow the garden. Once again she hugged me. Oh, I will miss you, Sergeant, she said as she squeezed. I will miss you too. Dear lady. I managed to get out while having the life drained out of me. Floggen had been watching and listening to the whole thing when I walked up to him. Well done, Sergeant. You are indeed a class act, he said as he puffed his pipe. Thank you, Floggen. Might I trouble you of the use of your footlocker and the storage for it? I asked. That stable will stay just as you left it, he insisted. Thank you, Floggen, but I don't know when or if I can return, I said. He put out his hand and said, Then it was truly an honor to become your friend, Dawn. And yours, Adam, he said. And yours, Adam, I said and put my hand on his shoulder, then turned. Lieutenant, are we ready? When you are sergeant, he returned. Oh, wait, a skin of owl for the two of you, and a thermos of soup for the good lieutenant for your trip, Martha said as she rushed around getting it all. Yes, please, Mum, thank you, said the lieutenant. He then looked at me and said, Mind your eye around that beast, Sergeant, she's plucked out a few, he said, pointing outside, then waving his finger in the air. Martha came and gave us our treats, and hugged me again and put her hand on my cheek, then ran into the kitchen to cry. Can you eat and fly at the same time, Lieutenant? I asked. I'm damn well going to try, he said, chuckling, and we were off. Dawn was breaking as we hit Stormwind. I had hoped to get a glimpse of Chile while we were airborne, but the moon was too low as we flew over the plague lands, and the land was very dark. Reaching the private landing area of the palace, I cleaned and bedded my griffin, all the while mindful of what the lieutenant said. She had indeed tried to drop me 3 times during the night's flight. After which, I ran down to Valdor's chambers to wake him. I knocked. No answer. I went in and yelled for him. No answer. Looking around, I found a note on his desk. I'm where the ale is free, and we can talk. The note said. I ripped up the note and threw it in the trash and headed for Valdor's office. Then, closing the door, pushed the panel beside the fireplace and headed down the stairs behind the fireplace. And there he was, sipping an ale and sitting waiting for me. There you are. I should have expected you 30 minutes ago, and where did you leave your damn bear? Valdor asked. I sat and grabbed the other ale. In the Pillage lands, Chile has taken a mate, I said, and smiled and took a sip of my ale. Has he really? I will never see that blasted bear again? Valdor said, smiling and sitting forward in his chair. I nodded and took another sip. Oh, I am sorry for your loss of your friend, Sergeant. I will admit he would have come in handy for this venture I think you're about to take, he said as he sat back and sipped his ale. I was keeping an eye on Nimicie. As I promised, she has been kidnapped by Sir Kaby and Sir Logan. I assume they are working together. During the day, they beat her and ask her questions about you, which she refuses to answer, by the way. But at night, they come in while she sleeps and probes her memories of when she was a child. I would assume they're hoping to catch a glimpse of her father's notebook he used to record how the pendants are made, he said, and took another sip of his ale before continuing. She's being held, on her realm, in that old cabin just outside of Stormwind by the falls, the one that's always filled with brigands and thieves. I assume they pay them to keep guard, he said, putting down his mug. That's all well and good, Valdor, but what can I do? I'm here in this realm and she in hers. How can I help? I asked, saddened by his tale. I thought about what I'm about to tell you, Sergeant. I thought long and hard, but since you are my greatest friend and saved my life more than a few times, here it is. Remember when I told you about the pendants I made in the sacred city? Well, I told you I made 2. In actuality, I made 3. He said, and put his hand in the air, putting his 4th finger and thumb together, and pulled a pendant from the air and held it dangling from his fingers. This one was made of the tiniest fragment of fell magic rock. It may only work once, which means if you use it, Sergeant, you may never return to Airy Peak, never see anyone you know and love again. You'll know everyone there, but they won't know you, and you can never tell them. You'll be alone, Sergeant, totally alone, Valdor said and continued. And this. He opened his fingers, and the pendant disappeared, and pulled from the air again, this time a bracer, and handed it to me. Put that on your left wrist, then make a fist, and put your fist into the palm of your right hand, he said, and I did as he asked. Do you see all the green and red dots and the green and blue lines between them on the bracer? He asked. Yes, it's like a mini-map, I said. Exactly. It's showing you all the realms and times the pendants were used. Green is Logan, blue is KB, and the few red lines, one's going from here to Hellscream, is Nimicie. They are planning something. Sergeant! Something big? He said, picking up his mug again and taking a sip. Now I am going to give you this pendant, Sergeant. I have to take a few protection spells off of it and add a non-tracking spell onto it, so I will meet you at your place tonight after I'm done, and leave it up to you if you go or not. But I warn you, I'm pretty sure it will only work once, he warned. Thank you, Valdor, but I have to ask, how come you didn't give it to me the first time we spoke of this here, or even the second time in your chambers? I asked. Well, first, it's mine, and my last resort escape if I ever needed it. Second, when you told me that KB helped Nimicie instead of killing her and destroying the pendant, I thought he's keeping it where he can find it at a future date. I thought the whole thing was odd, and with Nimicie still alive, my suspicions were validated. He said, sipping his ale. Anyway, I've got a lot of work to do, and I've been hidden down here long enough. I have to get up and moving around the palace to be seen, so no one comes snooping. I'll see you tonight. Go find something to do. Maybe go tell Anduin what's going on. He is the king, but he's also your friend, Valdor suggested. Leaving Valdor's office, I thought about what he said about informing the king. So I poked my head in the courtroom to see if he was busy. His Majesty was holding court with a bunch of counselors listening to suggestions for laws. I was just going to close the door, but I was spotted by the king. Ah, Sergeant! Back so soon? Come in, please, His Majesty yelled. 2 minutes, gentlemen, please, he said to the court. As I walked up to the throne, the king started speaking to me. Is your ward with you, Sergeant? He asked. No, your Majesty. I took a griffin to be here to surprise her when she arrives. Ah, very kind, Sergeant. And where is Chili? You know he's always welcome in my court. In fact, there's a few here I should very much like to introduce to Chili, he said, chuckling. Chili has taken a mate in the Pelage lands, your Majesty. The most beautiful, biggest black mountain grizzly I have ever seen. In 2 or 3 years, hunting in the Pelage lands will be great again, and with huge King's Guard trained bears, I said as I smiled and gave a bow. The king stood. Did you hear that, gentlemen? Council, I want a law. No bear hunting in the Pelage lands for the next 3 years. Environmental growth and so forth and so forth. And throw in something about all polar bears in the region are protected by the crown and are not to be hunted at all, punishable by death. Of course, any idiot stupid enough to hunt Chili deserves what he gets, I'd say, he said, as everyone politely chuckled. But it's always good to cover your bases, right, Sergeant? Yes, your Majesty. Thank you, your Majesty. And I'm sure Chili thanks you too, you Majesty, I said and again bowed and gestured for the king to come closer. He came down the stairs and put his hand on my shoulder and leaned into me. Your Majesty, I need to speak with my friend Anduin. Might he be around? I asked softly. The king leaned back and laughed loudly. Oh, Sergeant, you rascal, he said loudly, then continued. Not here. Gentlemen, His Majesty wishes a half-hour break to go into his private den and listen to the sergeant's dirty stories about ladies of the evening, the king said. And again, a polite chuckle from the court. Surely, a 30-minute break at this time of the day is not too much to ask for, he requested. No, your Majesty, from the court. Good, gentlemen. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. I've always wanted to say that. Reconvene in 30, gentlemen. Come along, Sergeant, the king said as we turned and headed out of the courtroom. Then, to continue our ruse, So, Sergeant, you look in fine shape for a man who experienced that, he said loudly. Oh, your Majesty, I may look fine, but I hurt all over, I said loudly as well, and the king laughed as we walked into his den and closed the door. Okay, Sergeant, we got about 30 seconds till ears are pressed against that door, so let's talk quietly over in the far corner and laugh loudly every few minutes, he said, quietly pushing me to the far side of the room. First, Sergeant, I know all about Nimicie and the realm traveling and your 2 assassins. Ha ha! You did not? He said. I did, I said, and we laughed loud. The problem is, Sergeant, I don't know how to help. If I give you any kind of law or edict or even a personal letter to explain the situation, I'm afraid the other me would call you a forger and lop off your head there and then. Her father. Really? The king said. He tried to shoot me, I said, and we both really did laugh that time. Wine, Sergeant? said the king loudly. Please, your majesty, I said loudly. Good, now go sit on the couch and hear. The king said, and poured himself and me a glass of wine, and handed me mine, then gestured for me to sit down as he quietly walked to the door and threw it open. And he was right. 3 or 4 people were standing close to his door. Ignoring them, he clapped and yelled, "Cigars!" a little too loudly as to punish those too close to his door. Then slammed it shut, turned to me and said, "That should buy us a few minutes. Now then." And the king grabbed his wine and headed for the couch as a knock at the door rang out. "Come," the king said. In came Captain Jerry Hinkle, an older King's Guard, and since he was an officer, they couldn't force retirement on him, so he's been around for a very long time. "Your cigars, your majesty," Jerry said. "Thank you, Captain," the king said, and took the cigars. "Hello, Sergeant. How is retirement treating you?" the captain asked. I stood at attention and gave a salute and said, "I hate it, sir. I would not recommend it," I said loudly because the captain was a bit deaf. He gave me back a salute, chuckling, and turned to go. But the king stopped him. "Jerry, you carry a long claymore sword, don't you?" the king asked. "Yes, your majesty. Too old and slow to carry a short sword, I'm afraid," the captain said humbly. "Ah, but with that sword, you strike fear, Captain. I want you to stand outside my door and pull your sword and chop off the ears of anyone who comes close," the king said loudly, so Jerry and anyone else on the other side of the door could hear him. The captain pulled his claymore and held it straight in front of him with one hand, saying, "Yes, your majesty," and walked out, closing the door behind him. "There, Sergeant. That should buy us some privacy," the king said, smiling. Sitting back down, I said, "The captain is still a very strong man. Did you see how he pulled that sword and held it perfectly with one hand?" I said, impressed. Then, having a second thought, stood and with a concerned face pointed at the box of cigars in the king's hand and said, "Anduin, you don't smoke?" I asked. "No, my friend, but you do," and he tossed me the cigars. "And I suggest you light one up and blow it towards the door," the king said as he got his wine and sat. "Always good to keep everyone around you guessing," the king said and continued, "Getting back to our problem, I have not yet thought of a way I can help. If I do, I'll let you know. But if it helps your conscience, Sergeant, as your king, I order you to go after those men and kill them, save the girl, and live happily ever after," the king said as he sipped his wine. I chuckled and said, "Thank you, your majesty," and lit my cigar. "Your majesty, how did you find out about Nimicie?" I asked. "It was you, Sergeant, the first day, parading by my courtroom without so much as a hello or by your leave, and then you coming through the courtyard clucking like a chicken, and Valdor behind you with his eye hanging out of his skull. I knew I had to find out what's going on," he said, took a sip of his wine and continued. "Now, as the king, I know there's a lot around here I'm not told about, and I'm usually grateful for that. But when 2 of my best friends show up like that, and I haven't heard word one about it, I get a little miffed," the king said. "I hit him that hard?" I asked. "This is no time to be impressed with yourself, Sergeant. You're being berated, if you haven't noticed." "Sorry, your majesty," I said. "Anyway, you remember that invisible cape Valdor gave me on my 15th name day? Well, it still fits. A little tight around the neck, but it worked well enough to sit at Valdor's desk and listen to the 2 of you after your bath. And Valdor sealed the room, after which I followed you out and ran past you to my den as you were bent over laughing, and that's when you came in as I was stuffing the cape in the couch," he said, looked at me and sipped his wine and continued. "Later that day I confronted Valdor, and he peeled like a grape, but only because he cares about you. I ordered him to my confidence and have been apprised of the situation since," the king said. "I'm sorry, your majesty. It's not like I don't trust my good friend Anduin. It's more like I didn't want to tie the king's hands into doing something that would haunt him, like chopping off my head for witchcraft," I said. The king nodded and sipped his wine. "Well, that may be. Still, I felt punishment due for not trusting a friend, so it was I who ordered Valdor to pick the griffin you rode here on," the king said and continued. "Did you have a nice flight, Sergeant?" "That blasted creature tried to drop me 3 times during the night's flight," I said, smiling. "Well, being that you're here and alive, I'm going to say, good. Lesson learned." Well, Sergeant, if I think of anything, I'll let you know. For now, I have to get back to work. Enjoy your cigar and clean up before you leave. Maybe offer the good captain a cigar for his help. The king gulped his wine and put his glass on the table, then, while opening the door, said, "You are the devil, Sergeant. Finish your cigar. I have to get back to work," the king said loudly. Then, "Good work, Captain. You are relieved. Oh, and the sergeant asked to see you in my den," said the king as he headed back to the courtroom. After giving the good captain his cigar and catching up a bit, I headed for my apartment in town to write a few letters saying goodbye. Arriving, the apartment. It was exactly how I left it, save a thin layer of dust from leaving the window open a crack. My uniform was still neatly folded on my dresser. The fireplace still had a crack to the ceiling, and the broken and scorched plate still lay in the ashes of the fireplace. The ghost of Nimicie still haunted the place, but now the thought of Nimicie brought eagerness and anticipation rather than sadness and regret. I sat to write 3 letters, one to Martha and Floggen, one to Mom, and one to Kylie, saving Kylie's for last, because I knew it would be the hardest to write. In each, I explained what I could of what was going on, and simply said where I was going was so far away there may be no way to ever get back home. I thanked every one of them for the parts they played in my life and how I felt about each, and how much I would miss everyone. Then I addressed them, and took the one for my mom, and the one for the Floggens, and mailed them. And while I was out, a quick stop at the bank to empty my account, get 1,000 in gold for pocket money, and get 2 mounts out of my safety deposit box, my fastest and my hardiest, a black stallion and a mammoth mount. As I left the bank, I sure hoped they accepted banknotes in the new realm, because my life savings of 80,000 gold was way too much for me to carry. On my way home, and worried about the banknote, I made a wise decision and stopped into the jeweler's and made his month by turning my banknote into a much more realm transfer friendly pouch of flawless diamonds that barely filled the palm of my hand. I thought about stopping in at the Pig and Whistle to have dinner and a few ales with Megan, but that would be a can of worms that would stay closed today. Instead, I went to Robbie's outdoor cafe for a nice mutton chop, then home to wait for Valdor. Keeping myself busy, I organized my rider's pouch and sharpened my short sword in Tanto and looked through my footlocker one last time to see if there was anything I could use. My camo face paint, a small round stick, a little larger than a bankroll of coppers, that I stuffed in my rider's pouch. Then looking through the locker again, I found an artist's rendering ring of a day-long time ago, while Anduin was still in the academy of the 4 of us. Chili sitting up on his fat ass. I on one side, Valdor on the other, and His Majesty in front of Chili with his sword out, and holding it facing down in front of him. I wanted to take it with me, but the frame was too big, and taking it out of the frame, it would not last long, since it was done in chalk. So I put it up on the cracked mantel of the fireplace and stared at it for at least an hour. The sun had set, and I found myself pacing my apartment waiting for Valdor's knock. "Come on, Valdor, where are you?" I found myself saying out loud. Just then a knock at the door. "Finally, where have you been?" I asked as I opened the door. A man in a hood and robe rushed through the door and put his hand to my mouth. "Quiet by order of the king." With my Tanto at his ear, I stopped, for I recognized him as Captain Pere, my replacement as the king's right-hand guard. I nodded, and he took his hand away. "Sergeant, take off your bow, your short sword, your arrows, and your Tanto and place them on the chair over there," he ordered. And I did as he ordered. "Do you have any other weapons on you, Sergeant?" he asked. I took the knife from my boot and placed it on the chair, saying, "That's all." He nodded and went back to the door and opened it, saying loudly, "Welcome, guests!" Through the door came 3 more guests, dressed the same in robes and hoods. One was hobbling. I knew that was Valdor. I walked away from the chair, and the tallest of the 3 met me in the center of the apartment. Taking off his hood, he said with a smile, "Hello, Sergeant." I knelt to the floor. "Your Majesty." No, none of that," he said, offering me his arm. "Everyone, while I'm here, I'm Mark Page," the king said while pulling me to my feet, my hand peeled from his arm with a sticky residue. "Yes, Mark," everyone said in unison. "None of that either," the king ordered. "Sergeant, might I have 2 of your cigars?" The king asked. Of course, Mark, I said and fished out my cigar box from my rider's pouch and opened it in front of him. He took 2 cigars, turned, and walked to the 2 guards at the door, saying, "Captain, are you satisfied with my safety?" The captain looked at me and nodded. "And are you both in plain clothes?" The king asked. "Yes, Mark, we are," said Captain Perry. "Good. Each of you take off your robes and put them over there. Then take these cigars and go stand on the porch and have a good long smoke if anyone passes. Make a joke about the wife making you smoke outside." The captain and the other guard took off their robes and took the cigars from the king, looked at me and said, "Thank you for the cigar, Sergeant." With a smile, "Anytime." I returned smiling. As they went outside, the king turned and said I couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye. Besides, I thought of something, but we'll get to that. What a lovely little apartment, Sergeant. Your chimney seems to have a crack. Did we get a little angry? He said, chuckling. Just a little, Mark, I said. I grabbed 3 glasses and poured us each an ale as Valdor took off his robe and joined the king. Handing everyone their ales, I asked, "Mark, why is my hand sticky?" "Well, we were passing Miss McKay's cart and had to stop for ice cream." "Uh-huh, the cart on the other side of town," I said, sipping my ale. "I believe your words were, first ice cream, then the good sergeant, Mark." Valdor said, chuckling and sipping his ale. "Valdor, you peel like a grape," the king said, and we all laughed. After taking a sip of his ale, the king looked at me with a serious face and said, "Don, are you sure? I was ordered by His Majesty. I have to go." I smiled and sipped my ale. "His Majesty will recant the order in a heartbeat. Are you sure?" the king repeated. "I love her." "Mark," I said with all sincerity. "Very well then," the king said and took off his robe. He was dressed in a black silk shirt and buckskin pants. He then bent over and put something in the fire. Teasing, I said, "I didn't know Mark owned a set of buckskins. Did you, Valdor?" "No, he must have stolen them." Valdor and I chuckled. "A finer pair of buckskins than either of you will ever own. Thank you," he said as he stood, then noticed the artist's rendering on the mantel. "I remember this day," the king said, taking down the picture and bringing it over to us. "Oh, the artist took so long," the king said. "It probably would have been quicker if you hadn't have kept saying to him, 'Hurry up, artist, my bear is getting hungry,'" I said. The king pointed at me, smiling, and said, "Right. Then I'd turn to Chili and ask, 'Chili, have you ever tasted artist?' And he'd yowl and nod." And we all laughed. "Look at the way Chili is looking at me. Even then he's picturing me covered in butter and lemon," Valdor said, scoffing. And in unison, the king and I said, "He loves you, Valdor." And we both laughed and sipped our ale. "Mark, I want you to have that picture. Put it in your den, maybe?" I said. "Oh, I couldn't, Sergeant," the king said politely. "I insist. I'm not going to be here. Please, for me," I requested. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'll put it on my wine table so it's a topic of conversation," the king said. Just then the 2 guards came back in. "Ah, the fun is over, gentlemen. On to business," the king said, and he put the picture on the table. "Sergeant, take off your armor, buckskin, and shirt, please," the king asked, and I did as he requested. Standing there bare-chested, the king turned back towards the fire and said, "I thought of something that would make me have to listen to you, Sergeant, but you're not going to like it. Do try to keep quiet, guards," he ordered. And the 2 guards at the door came up behind me and held my arms and put a strip of leather in my mouth to keep me quiet. The king leaned down to the fire, then stood and turned and walked over to me with the red-hot, glowing king's seal. "I am sorry, my friend," he said, and I nodded, and he pressed the king's seal hard into my chest and shoulder. The pain was excruciating and accompanied by the smell of burning flesh was almost unbearable. I bit hard into the leather and breathed even harder, trying to stay silent. The king then pulled the seal out of my shoulder and said, "There, that wasn't too bad, guards." And the guards let go of me, and both said, "Sorry, Sergeant." I did an about-face, and with my shoulder still smoldering, I sharply saluted the 2 of them. They sharply and proudly returned the salute. I've never been saluted by a dead man before. "Thank you, Sergeant," Captain Perry said, and they returned to the door. Then I turned and faced the king and Valdor, smiling. But they were not smiling. Then the king said, "Valdor, something for his pain, please." Valdor took some powder from a pouch, rubbed it between his palms, and pressed his hands to the front and back of my shoulder. I grunted, anticipating more pain, but there was none. It was gone, and my wound healed. He took his hands away as the king said, "I've never seen one healed before. Makes a handsome tattoo," and continued, "Oh, Valdor, while you're at it." The king held out his hand, and the side was smoldering and burnt with the top of the seal. "Seems I was pressing so hard, Sergeant, that my hand slipped down the handle and onto the top of the seal," the king said as Valdor healed his hand. "There, now we both have something," teasing, the king said. "Valdor, your turn," and swung the red-hot seal between his thumb and forefinger at Valdor, who kept hopping backward. "No. Very well, then," the king said, and dropped the seal in Valdor's ale. A sizzle and steam rose as we laughed. Valdor took the seal out of his ale and handed it back to the king, who took it, held it up, and said, "This never left the palace, gentlemen," and we all nodded. "I'm going to let that cool before I shove it back in my pants. Captain, keep an eye on it," the king said as he placed it on the table. "Ah, that's why the buckskins," I said. "You're a very clever man, Sergeant. Captain, take a lesson," the king said. "The sergeant is legendary, Mark. It was an honor to replace him," the captain said. I smiled and nodded in thanks. "Well, staying at that posh inn hasn't fattened you up any. Get dressed, Sergeant, and get your pouch and weapons on, too," the king said. Chuckling, I said, "On the contrary, I think I've put on 10 pounds. Martha's one of the best cooks in Azeroth. Well, you be the judge. Mark, you've got a bottle of peach jelly coming." "Oh, I do like jelly. And peach, you say?" the king asked. "Yes, but let Kylie surprise you with it. Oh, and would you give her this for me?" I gave the king Kylie's letter. "Do tell her I'm so sorry I won't see her graduate, if you would, Mark, please." "You were recommissioned and sent deep undercover for an undisclosed amount of time on an assignment for me," the king said while taking the letter. "The whole thing will be entirely my fault, my friend," he said, smiling. "I do appreciate that, Mark," I said. Valdor stepped over, holding a small key on a leather string. "This key was for a lockbox under my bed as a child. It had all my favorite things in it, but I lost everything when we had a fire as a child. But I've always kept the key. It's the only thing I can think of. I can give you that would make me believe you, since I've never told anyone till now what it is for," he said as he smiled and put it over my head and around my neck. "Thank you, Valdor. You are one of my best friends. I will miss you." Valdor, being a man not easy to sentiment, nodded and said, "Same?" "Gentlemen, shall we get on with it?" the king asked, then turned to the guards at the door. "You two, kindly face the door for a few minutes," the king ordered, and then turned back to us as the guards did an about-face. Valdor again pulled the pendant from the air. "Here, Sergeant, I'm pretty sure it will only work once. You'll know if it turns black after you use it," he said as he handed it to me, and I put it around my neck. Valdor came and stood behind me, and with the king to my side, nodding goodbye, Valdor said, "Think of Hellscream, think of Nimicie." All I could think of was the night Nimicie disappeared on her knees and tears streaming down her face, yelling, "Hellscream, come find me!" It must have worked, because when I opened my eyes, there was a porthole in front of me and from behind. "Goodbye, my friend," and a push. For a second, darkness. Then I was outside Stormwind, but just in the Valley of Heroes. I stood next to a bush and a tree. The moon was high in the sky, so all was lit well to see and quiet. "You there? Why are you lurking in the shadows, and who are you?" I turned to see a corporal of the city guard to my far left. I casually looked around to see if he was alone, so if I needed to, I could take him out, but I thought he may be useful for information, so I played friendly. "Just relieving myself. Corporal, is it?" I asked as if I didn't know. "Yes, and who are you?" he demanded. "Oh, forgive me, Mark. Mark Page, a humble hunter and fisherman at your service, Corporal." "Well, Mr. Page, what are you doing out at this time in the morning?" he asked as he did an inspection circle around me. "There is a bear who likes to fish by the falls just before dawn. I was on my way to go set a trap for him, been watching him for a week now." "This is the first time I've seen you," the corporal said. Knowing that the city guard changed shifts at 5 a.m., I said, "I usually come through here around 20 after 5, or at least I have this week." I smiled. "I don't believe you, Mr. Page," the corporal said. "Really? And why is that?" I asked with a smile. Well, Mr. Page, for starters, you carry a King's Guard bow and watch, 3 quivers of arrows, one of which is a Sargeron quiver. You carry a tanto, dead giveaway for King's Guard. You carry a rider's pouch, much like those carried by His Majesty's court, and your armor is very expensive and rare. I'd say drainy. And you know when the guard changes and set your time just after, so. No, Mr. Page, not a hunter, an assassin. But since you are heading out of my city, and to an area well known for its low lifes, and I do not have another 5 guards with me, I will wish you good day, sir, the corporal said. I looked at the corporal impressed. You're very astute, Corporal. Have you thought about the officer's training test at the academy? I asked. He laughed and said, You have to be a King's Guard. Not so, Corporal. The test is open to all branches of the service. But yes, if you're accepted, you have to switch to King's Guard. But a little hard work for 4 years and then an officer for the rest of your life. Anyway, something to think about, Corporal. Davis, sir, he said. Corporal Davis, I will remember you, I said, smiling and waving a finger at him. Somehow, Mr. Page, I think that's an honor. Thank you. Holding up my watch, I said, Oh, Davis, the date and time, please, I asked. He gave it to me and continued his patrol. Well, the date and time were the same, so that's a bonus. Now on to rescue Nimicie. And I thought to myself, I must find a place to hide my armor, arrows, and watch after all this. With the corporal gone, I slipped into the shadows and made my way toward the falls. The city was quiet at this hour. Only the occasional sound of boots echoing off cobblestone or the faint bark of a dog in the distance. I kept my hood pulled low and moved casually, but every step carried the weight of urgency. The thought of Nimicie being beaten during the day and probed in her sleep at night churned my stomach. I could not fail her, not after everything we had already endured together. My fingers brushed the bracer Valdor had given me, and the tiny green, blue, and red dots glowed faintly in the darkness, proof that my enemies were close, and Nimicie even closer. Reaching the edge of the city walls, I paused, listening carefully for the sounds of brigands Valdor warned me about. A faint murmur of voices carried on the night air, and I knew I was nearing the cabin. Arriving at the cabin, I kept low and in the bushes, about 20 yards off, and put on my face paint on my face and hands, and up my bow arm, which was always bare from the elbow down to the wrist. Well, until now, I had Valdor's tracking bracer on it, and I hoped it would not catch my bow at an inopportune time. From the front, I could make out 9 guards. Well, so-called guards. Mostly thieves and brigands, and normally I would just have nothing to do with these lowlifes. But today they were keeping me from the woman I love and aiding in her capture, so I vowed each one of them would die this night. Slowly, quietly, I moved around to the back of the cabin and found the back guard, guarded by a single trained wolf. This would be a problem because wolves instinctively yelp when they die. Well, so much for a quiet one-on-one killing spree. I thought to myself and took careful aim at the wolf and fired, hitting him right in the throat and through his spine. A muffled huff was all he got out, to no notice of any of the guards. I smiled and thought, Lucky shot, Zart! Then made my way up the far right side of the cabin, for it was the darker side as the moon had moved. I pulled my short sword and hugged the back corner of the cabin as I slowly moved around the right side, keeping low and in the shadows. The first guard I came across was leaned against the wall, snoring loudly. I crept up beside him, then sprang, putting my hand over his mouth and my sword through his heart, and I continued making the snoring noise while I dragged his body into the bushes. The second guard was on an attic entrance balcony above the first floor, leaning over the railing, having a smoke. I put my sword away and grabbed my bow and put an arrow in his head, right behind his ear. Falling over the balcony, his body hit the tall grass with a thud that went unnoticed, but I was more worried about the smoke. I didn't need a fire right now. So I quickly moved to the body and put out the smoke and took back my arrow. The third one was close to the front of the cabin when I last looked, but was gone now. Sneaking up the side, about 10 yards out from the cabin, the light from a smoke lighting up a squatting pair of knees behind a bush with his pants down. Pulling back my arrow, I waited for him to take a drag of his smoke, and I shot and dropped him quietly. The ledge to the window was right in front of me, so I slowly took a peek. There was no one in the cabin that I could see but Nimicie, naked and beaten and tied to a chair. She was so skinny they must have been starving her and giving her little if any water. Now, I was pissed. It's not like I was in the mood to give quarter anyway, but I found myself wishing Chili was here to slowly rip each one of these guards limb from limb. I marched out to the bush to get my arrow, which had hit the guard in the nose, and came out behind his ear. I put my boot on his jaw and took back my arrow, leaving his body still shitting all over itself. I was pissed, and really wasn't thinking, but I managed to calm down and recollect my cool as I made my way back to the back of the cabin and pulled my arrow from the wolf. I remember thinking, shame I didn't have time. I wonder what I'd get for that pelt. Putting my arrow back in my quiver and my bow on my back, I decided no quicker, painless deaths. The remaining 6 guards would feel my anger. Being a bit more stealthy now, on the moonlit side of the house, I came up behind guard number 4, put my hand over his mouth, and 2 quick jabs with my short sword, one in each lung, so he couldn't scream. Then I dragged my sword across his belly and spilled his guts all over his boots and walked over him as I dropped him. This guard number 5 would find himself getting a free lobotomy and have both veins in his forearms opened for him, as he quivered and quaked on the ground, drooling all over himself. Guard 6 got off easy, since he was sleeping against the wall. I just slit his throat as I walked by. Guard 7 had to be my favorite, since he was lighting a cigar. I put my short sword back in its sheath and grabbed my boot knife and held it by the blade, since the handle looked like a cigar. I walked up to him and said, "Hey, buddy, got a light?" holding up the handle of my knife. He turned with his cigar in his mouth and one hand blocking the wind from the match he held in the other. Then I spun the knife into my hand and shoved it into his Adam's apple and twisted as he sputtered and chirped. I took his cigar out of his mouth, took a long drag, then put it out in his left eyeball while ripping my knife out of his throat to the side. I spat and thought to myself, I hate the taste of cheap cigars. The last 2 would be in the front of the house, a well-lit area, so they would have to be bow shots. I slipped back into the brush around the cabin and made my way quietly to in front of the cabin about 20 yards out. The 2 guards at the front were right at the door. One was against the wall with his foot on the wall and using his knee as a table, carving something with his knife, and was well distracted. The other just standing straight against the door frame. And when he leaned his head back and closed his eyes, I took my shot, sinking an arrow between his eyes and pinning him to the door frame. Hearing the loud thwack, the arrow made the other guard dropped his carving and knife and ran, not even yelling to warn the others. Not that there were any. I quickly put an arrow through his back and was going to leave that arrow in him because a coward should always be marked. But walking up to the doorway, I saw the child's toy little bear he was carving and shook my head. I picked it up, walked over to him, ripped the arrow from his spine as he lay groaning barely alive, and threw the toy on top of him and spat on him, and walked away. With my bow drawn, I quickly went inside the cabin, looked around, checked all the closets and even the attic to make sure none were left. Then putting away my arrow, went and untied Nimicie. With both her eyes swollen shut, nose was broken, and her cheeks and jaw broken and blued, she still tried to smile and say, "I knew you'd come." "Shh, Nimicie. Save your strength. My love will get you fixed up," I said as I untied her and, so I could move faster, threw her over my shoulder to carry her as I ran. There was only one person I could think of, Valdor. I hoped he was here. I hoped he was still the king's vizier, and the quickest way there was to use the secret escape route behind the falls that led to His Majesty's private den. I ran through as quickly as I could, being mindful of the traps, and made it to His Majesty's den and came out from behind a bookcase, spotted a guard in the den. This realm was different, I thought to myself as I came up behind him and knocked him out. Putting Nimicie on the couch, I took off the guard's uniform and put it on, putting my buckskins on Nimicie. Then again, throwing her over my shoulder, headed for Valdor's chambers. Opening the door a crack to look down the hall, the hallway was empty. Dashing down the hall, 2 guards turned the corner, and without missing a beat, I said, "Okay, Trollop, let's get you home," and smiled as I passed them. It worked, and I quickened my pace to Valdor's chambers. Reaching his room, I just walked in and closed the door behind me. Valdor was sitting at his desk, sipping an ale. What's the meaning of this? Who are you? Who is she? Why have you burst into my room? Valdor fired at me. Valdor, old buddy, Nimicie needs your help, I said as I headed for his couch. I promise I'll explain. Please help her, I said, panicked. Old buddy? No, not there. My bed goes put her in my bed, Valdor said, pointing into his bedroom. I knew I could count on you, Valdor. In any realm, I said loudly as I carried her into his bedroom, followed by Valdor after he grabbed a bunch of potions and powders. She was kidnapped and beaten badly and starved and no water, broken bones everywhere, I said. All right, you, whoever you are, go wait in the other room and stay out of my stuff, Valdor ordered. After about an hour and me wearing a hole in Valdor's floor from pacing, he came out with my buckskins in his hands. By the smell of these, I'd say whoever kidnapped her is no longer alive. He tossed me my buckskins. Now, who are you? I gave him the key he gave me from the other realm and explained while I took off the guard uniform and put on my buckskins. You gave that to me, Valdor. It was the key to the box under your bed as a child before your house burned down. You said if I ever needed to make you listen to me, give you that key. Valdor took out the key from around his neck. It was an exact match. Okay, I'm listening, but you still haven't told me who you are, Valdor said. How is Nimicie? I asked. She was in very bad shape. Another hour and she'd be dead, but she'll make it. She's strong. A few weeks or so, bed rest some fluids, and she'll be fine, Valdor said and crossed his arms. Now your turn, he ordered. Valdor, I swear, but I need to get this uniform back to the guard. I took it off before he wakes up. You didn't kill him? Valdor asked. No, he's a brother. I would never kill a Kingsguard, I said. Valdor looked at me and sighed, held out his hand for the uniform and said, Where? His Majesty's private den, I said. Well, you know about the tunnels, and you've either been in the service or are one informed assassin, he said as he took the uniform and grabbed a jug of wine. Wait here, he started, and I interrupted. No, Valdor, your office in 10 minutes, okay? He nodded, then said, Wash up first, and left. I washed up and headed out of Valdor's chambers. It was a little after 4 a.m., so the comings and goings of the morning cooks, bakers, and product deliveries made it easy to slip through the palace unnoticed. But to be safe, I grabbed a barrel of ale off a cart and held it on my shoulder to hide my face. Slipping into Valdor's office, I closed the door behind me and heard Valdor's voice. All right, we're here. Who are you? He said as he walked up to me. Valdor, you don't hobble, I said, astonished. Hobble? I've never hobbled. Who are you? He ordered. Oh, right in this realm I died. Not here. And I walked past him to the panel beside the fireplace, pushed it, and went down the stairs behind the fireplace. Valdor came down right behind me. Amazing, it looks and smells exactly the same, I said, astonished, as I sat. Valdor, do that thing you do with the cloth. Dwarven ale, please, I asked. Well, whoever you are, you got good taste in beverages, he said and did his thing, and 2 mugs of dwarven ale appeared. I took a long gulp of my ale and started. My name is Sergeant Don Zart of His Majesty's Royal Guard. I told him everything about the assassins and Nimicie and the pendants and my Azeroth in my realm called Airy Peak, and our friendship with him and I and Anduin, our academy days, and the battles we've stood together in. I even told him about Chili and how Chili accidentally bit half his ass off. It was nearly 8:30 and 4 hours before I finished talking. I knew I was right about you, he said. I thought to myself, any man who would barge into the Grand Vizier's chambers in the middle of the night caring more about the woman he was carrying than his own life was someone I'd be friends with, he said, smiling. I looked at him out of the corner of my eye and said, You're a lot more chipper than my Valdor. I have my whole ass, he said, chuckling. He asked me what my plans were to get Sir Logan and Sir KB, and I has to be honest and tell him I had no idea. I then showed him my bracer and how it worked, and the pendant that was still glowing green, and told him how I wish he had have explained how they both work more. Well, do you trust me? He asked. Yes, Valdor, with my life. In any realm, I said. Then leave them with me for a few days while your friend heals, and I'll try to reverse engineer the magic on each. I took both off and handed them to him. Oh, and Don, a lot here happened as you said as well, but the king did not have a sort of older brother to guide him here, he said and continued. He is a fair man, but not nearly as friendly and fun-loving or trusting as your king. I'd avoid him if I were you. I took his warning and nodded. How long till Nimicie will wake up Valdor? I asked, looking at my watch. Oh, you can't move her for a few days, Dawn. Okay, well, I've got to find a place to bunk out and get some sleep. Mind if I bunk out here? No, but wouldn't you be more comfortable at your father's place? Valdor asked as he sipped his ale. My what? I asked in shock. Captain Jonathan Zart? He is your father, isn't he? Oh, right, you died here. My father is alive, I asked and stood. Maybe you shouldn't, Dawn. He is an old man and his son died many years ago, Valdor warned. I at least have to see him, please, Valdor, I begged. Valdor hesitantly gave me his address, which was, strangely enough, my old address, and I ran to go see my father. I had grabbed a city map from a street vendor and planned on knocking on my father's door and asking for directions. I found myself growing more nervous the closer I got, and even hesitating for a minute before I knocked. I knocked and started opening my map, but he answered sooner than I expected. Oh, hello. I was wondering. Before I got out another word, he wrapped his arms around me and hugged the stuffing out of me, and even for a man in his late 70s, he was extremely strong. I don't know how or why, or even if you're an angel come to take me to heaven. I don't care. I got my son back. I hugged him back. I missed you too, Da. After about 5 minutes, he let go and stood in front of me, a little shorter and a lot grayer, but my spitting image otherwise. He pulled me by my armor into the house and closed the door, not in a paranoid way, but more like he didn't want to let go of my way. Mom's right. I am the spitting image of you. Mum, I yelled and looked around. Shh, son, she's not here, lad. She died a month after you, of a broken heart. I tried to get her to eat or drink. She refused it, and just lied there crying until she had no more tears and died. With tears streaming down my face, I hugged him again and said, I'm so sorry, Da. I'm so sorry you went through that. There, son. It was a long time ago. So not that I'm not over the moon to see you, son, but how? Wiping my face, I said, Can I take a bath while we talk, Da? Of course, son, and I'll get you some fresh clothes. You smell like you killed 10 men, he said. 9, actually, I said, chuckling and getting undressed and into the tub. He came into the bathroom with a fresh set of clothes, 2 ales, and a chair for himself, and put everything down and gave me my ale, then slowly ran his fingers over the king's seal, burned into my chest and shoulder, with a very proud smile on his face, then sat and sipped his ale as I told him just what I finished telling Valdor. Well, that's a story and a half, he said, smiling. And there's no way for you to go back? He asked. I don't know, Da, but I've got some assassins to get rid of first, I said, getting dressed. Which reminds me, I said, and dug deep into my rider's pouch and pulled out the bray of Mum's hair. Here, Da, Mum's hair, not even 3 weeks old, I said as I handed it to him. He took it and smelled it. My sweet Beth, alive? He said as a tear formed in his eye. She goes to your grave every year, Da, on your anniversary, then goes home and polishes the funeral wagon from top to bottom. Then I told him the story of how he died in his funeral and how I joined the King's Guard the very next day. Then he told me the story from what he knew, how I died here. I remember that battle. Something told me to jump, and I did, and a mortar hit directly where I was standing, I remembered. Same with me, son. Something told me to move. Anyway, Da, if there is any way possible, whether you go there or she comes here, I'm going to get you and Mum together again. Oh, I don't know, son. She's mourned me for a long time, and I her. She may not feel the same. Bullshit, Da. You're telling me you would not greet her as you did me? I would. And enough with the dwarf, son. It's good to hear it again, but not the cussing that goes with it, he said. Okay, Dad, I said. So you took your lady to Valdor. Have you told the king yet? He asked. Not yet, and from what Valdor says, I'm not sure I should, I said, looking at him. He is the king's son, and you are conducting illegal activities in his kingdom. You did just kill 9 men. Son, besides in your realm, you say he's your friend. Don't you think you owe him that? Dad asked. I'll get you a private audience. It may take a week or 2, but I'll get you in. Meantime, you stay here and behave, and I'd leave your armor bow and watch here if I were you. I'd get my uniform on, and we'll see your friend, he said. Uniform? You're still active? I asked. They'll have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands, son, he said, smiling. You never became an officer, son? he asked. Oh, they tried a few times. I don't know. Maybe I didn't want the responsibility or the disconnection with my men, but every time I got a battlefield commission, I'd punch an officer in the nose and get busted back to sergeant. Then when I reached 45 and tried to get promoted, no one would do it. Can't say I blame them. Even Anduin said, "You made your bed, Sergeant. Lie in it." So when mandatory retirement came up, I had no choice. Oh, Anduin kept putting off signing the order, but even he had to give in eventually, I said. Anduin uses to say, "As a king you have all the power, and none at all, at the same time." Wisest words I've ever heard. I said, then showed Dad my watch. He got into his uniform, and we marched to the palace. It had always been one of my dreams to march beside my father, only in my dreams we were both wearing uniforms. We got to the palace, and he introduced me to a lot of his friends, which were in my realm, my friends, as his visiting nephew, Danny. I put on a thick dwarven accent for everyone, which Dad got a real kick out of. Then he showed me his office. "Benefits of an officer's son," he said as he opened the door, and except for the colors and paintings, it looked just like the king's private den. Looking at his daily orders. This is strange. I'm supposed to berate a guard found naked and smelling of wine while on duty. Oh, Dad. Not too bad. I knocked him out and stole his uniform to go through the palace last night. Then Valdor came back and poured wine on him and tossed his uniform beside him, I said, and Dad nodded. A warning it is, then, he said with a smile. Oh, Dad, would you have an application for the Officers' Academy test around here? I asked. Little late for you, son, he said. No, it's for a friend, and if you would sign the recommendation section of it too, please, I asked. Dad went into his drawer and pulled out the application and signed the recommendation section and handed it to me. Must be some friend being recommended by a Kingsguard captain, Dad said. An astute young corporal of the city guard who made me for a Kingsguard in mere seconds last night and in the dark, I said, and Dad nodded impressed. Let's go see Valdor and your friend's son. Oh, and I'm not as informal with Valdor as you are, son, so you'll forgive me if I put on a show, he said, and I smiled. We went to Valdor's office, and he was working on the pendant. I see you don't take my advice, and you don't knock Dawn. Are you sure we're friends? He asked as he put his work away. Now there's the grumpy Valdor I know and love, I said, chuckling. Welcome, Captain. What do you think of how your son turned out? Valdor asked as he walked over to us. Well, Your Holiness, he could have used a few more slaps in the head when it comes to respecting, but I'm pretty proud of him. Thank you, Your Holiness. My dad said with a slight bow. Oh, I was going to enjoy this, I thought to myself. How is Nimicie, Valdor? I asked. She was awake half an hour ago when I checked and drinking some juice and a nice thick milkshake through a straw, but let's go see her. We all walked to Valdor's chambers, and I rushed in to see Nimicie, who was sitting up sipping juice through a straw, looking a lot better, but her face still bruised and swollen and her eyes half swollen shut. I sat on her bed facing her, trying to smile. I'm so sorry, my love. I got here as soon as I could, I said. She tried to smile, then putting her hand on mine and through her swollen face, she said quietly, I would have rather died in that chair last night than go on living the rest of my life without you, she said. With a tear in my eye, I wanted to grab her and hug her, but I settled for gently holding her hand and saying, I will be by your side, forevermore, my love. I said and bent and kissed her hand. A soft knock at the door, and my father came in, and I gestured for him to come over. Nimicie, this is my father, Captain Zart, I said. She tried to smile and put her hand on my cheek, then held it out for my father, who took it and kissed it. You are the reason I have my son back, dear lady. I am in your debt for the rest of my life, he said to her. She then put her hand on his cheek and then over her heart. Looking at the two of us, she fell asleep. I took the glass from her other hand and put it on the table. I'm going to stay with her a while, Dad. I'll see you back at home later, I said. He nodded and left, and Valdor said quietly, I'll be in my office, and closed the door behind him. Nimicie would not wake up again that night. As I sat with her as she slept, I was thankful for my life, and the wonderful woman who lay beside me, for it was her who indeed made me realize my life was not nearly over yet. I stayed with her till about 10 that night, then went back to Dad's place and picked up a couple of steaks on the way for me and Dad and a keg of dwarven ale. and joined him for a late supper. "Have you eaten?" I asked. "I had a cup of beans around 5, he said. "Well then, these will go down nicely then," I said with a smile, showed him the steaks, and hung them over the fire. "Oh, I'll be up half the night with nightmares of dancing food, but totally worth it," Dad said with a smile. We ate our steaks and chatted over ale, then I got up and handed him my watch and said, "If you're up, wake me between 2 and 3, please." He nodded, and I went to put a blanket on the floor. "Oh no, son. You take the bed. I only sleep 20 minutes at a time anyway. Damn bladder," he said. "I couldn't take your—" I started, and he interrupted, saying, "You'll take the bed and count your lucky stars. I don't come over and tuck you in, kiss you on the head, and read you a bedtime story," he said, waving his finger at me. I laughed and took the bed. "Dad, how old was I when I joined the King's Guard here?" I asked. "You were 16. He climbed to the top of the barn and threatened to jump if your mother didn't sign the permission slip," he said as he took a sip of his ale. "If I had have been there, you would have got the beating of your life with that stunt," he said. "You were dead 3 years later, almost to the day. Your mother never forgave herself," he said quietly, took a cigar and headed out to the porch. True to his word, Dad woke me up at exactly 2:30 a.m. "Ah, thank you, Dad." I jumped out of bed, and he jumped in saying, "No, thank you, son, for the warm bed." And we laughed. "Why the devil did you wad up at this time for anyway?" he asked. "I'm hoping to find that city guard again." Dad turned over and said, "I want to see that application on my desk within a fortnight. Good night, son." "Good night, Dad," I said, smiling. I put on a plain shirt and pants and pulled on my boots and put 4 of the cigars the king gave me in my breast pocket and put on my watch and grabbed the application and folded it and also put it in my pocket and went out looking for the corporal. I found him trying to light a cheap cigar by the canals. "Does this outfit suit you better, Corporal Davis?" I said loudly, coming up beside him. "Ah, Mr. Page, I was wondering if I'd see you again," he said, trying to puff a cheap cigar. I reached over, took the cigar out of his mouth, and threw it in the canal, then pulling one from my pocket, and said, "Try an officer's cigar," and offered it to him. He took it, smiling, and I took one from my pocket and lit both for us. "Oh, that's a good smoke. Thank you, Mr. Page. Still, I could have kept that cheap one for later," he said, smiling. I chuckled and took another cigar from my pocket and tucked it into the top of his armor. "Why, thank you, Mr. Page," he said appreciatively. "Mr. Page, did you know Mark Page is the name His Majesty uses when he travels?" he asked casually. "I did," I said. "Call me Dawn, Corporal." "This is a good cigar, Dawn. Thank you." "Did you hear about the troubles last night by the falls, the very area you said you were going to?" he asked. "No, what happened?" I asked, puffing my cigar. "Well," he said, puffing his cigar, "seems there was some kind of gang war over at the old cabin. 9 men were found brutally murdered. Of course, all were known criminals, so we're not looking too closely into it, but the captain seems to think it was another gang with similar weapons. A short sword and a boot knife and arrow holes, but the gang was smart enough to take their arrows back out of the dead men," he said. "Really?" I asked. "One man was found with an arrow hole in his spine and a carved toy bear on his back," he said, taking another puff of his cigar. "Arrow in the back, you say? A coward running away?" I asked. "That seems to be the case, but no one will tell that to the little 7-year-old girl we had to take over to the orphanage today." He said, looking for my reaction. "Oh, I am sorry for that little girl's fortune," I said with concern. "To have a coward for a father, a criminal I could forgive, but a coward, never," I said. He held up his cigar for a toast. "My thoughts exactly, Don." I toasted his cigar with mine. "Just curious, Don, how much do you think you could have got for that wolf pelt when it was still fresh, of course?" he asked. "I went after the bear and missed damn it all," I said. "If you ever want to play poker, Don, do give me a call, would you?" he asked. "I wouldn't dare, Corporal. I wouldn't dare," I said, chuckling. "Can I run a theory past you, Don? Of course. Me being a corporal, no one would ever listen to me. And those men not worth the spit that made them, but just for my peace of mind, could I share a thought with you?" he asked. "I'm intrigued. Yes, please," I said. "I think, after I left you last night, you went directly over to that cabin and sized it up, took out the wolf first through the voice box, knowing that wolves instinctively yelp when they die, then chose the right side of the cabin, because with where the moon would have been, that would have been the darker side. Took out the guards on that side with headshots. Very merciful. Then saw or heard something that pissed you off. Came back to the back of the cabin, then went up the left side, brutally murdering each guard. So he suffered, then took out the first front guard and pinned him to the doorframe. Oh, we found the arrow notch in the doorframe. Then, as the coward ran, you put an arrow in his back. And only then saw the toy bear and ripped out the arrow and threw the toy on him instead. Of course, that's just a thought and no proof, of course, he said and continued. Still, I should think you'd want to do something for that poor little girl, he said, looking at me and puffing his cigar. I looked at him for a minute and pulled out the application and handed it to him, saying, I am, right now, Corporal Davis, I said with a serious face. What's this? He said, chuckling, and he opened it. Holy crap, he said. Is this what I think it is? He asked in disbelief. I smiled and put my cigar in my mouth and nodded. Me an officer, you weren't kidding last night. I thought you were poking fun at me, he said. You're very smart, Corporal. Too smart to be a corporal the rest of your life. You're young, in good shape, the right motivation, and I could see you as an officer. Are you married, Corporal? I asked. Yes, sir, he said, looking at the application. Any kids? I asked. We've been trying, but no luck so far, sir, he said. Look at the recommendation section, Corporal, I said. Captain Zart of His Royal Majesty's Guard. He read and dropped his cigar. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, I do feel bad about that little girl, I said. He nodded. As do I, Don. How about this, Corporal? You fill that out, take the test and pass. Transfer into the King's Guard and then show up at the palace in a cadet uniform with your wife and ask for Captain Zart. He will go with you to the orphanage, give his personal recommendation and pay the 60 gold. I believe it is to adopt, and then give you a bursary to pay for your full tuition and a humble but livable annuity for the next 4 years you're in school. A chance to show your wife and that little girl what a true hero is, I said, and stuck out my hand. He looked at me, thought for a second, then said, I have to talk to my wife, but I think we have a deal, Don, he said, smiling, and took my hand and shook it hard. Who are you really, Don? He asked. Ah, if I told you that I'd have to kill you, I said, chuckling, and 5 extra guards wouldn't help me, I'm sure, he said, smiling. No, not really, I said as I lit my last cigar, and walking away I said, oh, and Davis? Dad said to have that on his desk within a fortnight. It will be there tomorrow, he yelled back. When I got back home, Dad was up making breakfast. Damn, now I have to share, he smiled and said. That's right, you do. I chuckled. Over breakfast, I told Dad all the goings-on that night, and he agreed to help Davis all he could, but funds were limited. That's when I gave him 500 gold, half of what I had on me, and showed him the diamonds and told him what I paid for them. That's when he told me I made a very smart decision, for what I had would cost 3 times as much here. I gave him 10 of the 25 diamonds I had, and said that should take care of him and the Davises if he ever showed. Oh, and son, I got you that appointment with the king under my name, so 4 days from now, get your head together, Dad said. I went to the palace with Dad. He went to his office, and I went and saw Valdor, who was still working on my project, then Nimicie, and spent the morning with her. She was doing much better. The swelling had gone down a lot, and we got her up walking around Valdor's chambers and back to bed. At lunch, I ran over to the Pig and Whistle and picked up 2 to-go orders of their famous lamb stew. Megan was as sweet as candy and didn't know me from Adam. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Then ran back to Dad's office as he sat there with a cup of beans from the commissary. I took his beans and threw them in the trash and put an order of lamb stew in front of him and smiled and went to the other side of the desk to eat mine. I'm going to get fat with you around, son, he said as he opened his stew pot. Indulge me, Dad. I haven't seen you in 34 years, I said. As we sat and enjoyed our stew, a knock at the door. Dad wiped his mouth. Come, he said. The door opened, and in walked Corporal Davis of the City Guard. Excuse me, Captain, but he started, and I interrupted. Davis, come in, close the door, I said with a smile, and stood to shake his hand. I stood beside him and said, Dad, This is the young man we've been talking about, Corporal Davis of the City Guard. Pleased to meet you, Corporal, Dad said, and stood to shake his hand. Davis shook his hand and said, Well, not any more. And he continued, I showed my captain the application for the King's Guard Academy, and he said, If Captain Zart wants you in the King's Guard, you're going to the King's Guard. And he gave me this. He said and handed my father an immediate transfer order, and then continued, Also, sir, here is the application filled out and signed, and the captain asked me to tell you, the investigation file for the incident at the cabin has been lost, and he believes it will never be found again. Sir, Davis finished. Ah, good man, that Captain Colby, my father said, looking at me, and I nodded. Well, sit down, Davis, and we'll get a few guards to witness and get you sworn in after lunch, Dad said and sat. When would you like to take your exam, son? Dad asked Davis. Well, I'll take it today, sir, Davis said. No, you won't, I said, and walked over to Dad's library behind him and started pulling a few books on subjects I knew were on the test. The blue on the far left, son. The history of the King's Guard. Add that to his studies, Dad said as he ate. I grabbed it and went over and handed the stack of books to Davis, asking, How long for you to read those, Davis? Oh, about a week, Don, he answered. He'll take his test in 2 weeks. Dad, I said. Done, Dad said, and ate another spoonful of stew. So, young man, my father said while finishing his stew and wiping his mouth with his napkin, if you pass this test, you'll be entering the academy as a ward of the Zart family, a proud and noble name in the King's Guard. My son says you're very astute. Prove it, and tell me what you know about me. Davis looked at both of us. You wanted a test today, Davis. Here it is, I said. Davis stood and started. Well, sir, apart from the obvious, you have a keen and sharp mind, sir. The fact you knew every book your son was pulling just by the sound and without looking. You live in town and not here at the palace, because you keep a folded blanket on the corner of your couch. You are a powerful man with a lot of influence, but are confident in yourself and have no need to show off your importance. The fact that your desk sits askew from the door and not directly facing it, and your medals and honors are on a side wall and not directly behind you. You are widowed, but not recently, due to the lack of portraits and the fact, though your uniform is impeccable, but there is a lack of a crease in your trousers, and no King's Guard wife would allow her husband, a captain no less, to walk around like that. Also, your son has thick brown hair and mustache, yet a red 5 o'clock shadow suggests your wife was dwarf. You are kind, sir, and enjoy the company of animals, dogs in particular, though I don't think you own one, but are visited enough by one or more to keep a fresh bowl of water in the corner of your office. And due to the fact that there is a statue in the graveyard with your son's name on it, and the fact you hang his medals on your wall higher than your own, till recently, you thought he was dead, perhaps deep under cover. And with the way both of you say each other's name with such pride and love, he thought the same of you. Finally, with the cup of beans in the garbage, and the way you ate your lamb stew from the Pig and Whistle, your son bought you lunch today. Davis finished and sat. Astonished, Dad and I looked at each other. Oh, I got to know, I said, and went over to the corner and stuck my finger in the water bowl and tasted it, fresh. Who's the dog, Dad? I asked. Major Moresby has a little wiener dog he calls Private. Gets him to carry his mail. It's the cutest thing, Dad said, and we all chuckled. Now, Davis, the test, the wardship, the bursary, all of it goes away if you don't remember one thing. That man right there, my father said and pointed at me. Does not exist, he warned. He is my visiting nephew from Lochmode N. Danny, understood? Dad asked. Yes, sir. My word, sir, Davis said. What did your wife say about the little girl, Davis? I asked. You know it was the funniest thing. Danny, when I got home and showed her the application before I could even talk about our deal, she said, as an officer, we could adopt that poor little girl. Then she said what you said. You could show her what a real hero is. Davis said. That's a good woman you have there, Davis. You hold on to her, I said, and he nodded. Speaking of good women, I've got to go see one, Dad. You'll get him sworn in right after lunch, I said as Dad slid the rest of my stew to his side of the desk. And Davis, what's your first name? I asked. Ernie, he said. Ernie, I'll see you again, I said, and shook his hand, and off to see Nimicie I went. Arriving at Valdor's quarters, I knocked and entered, and not seeing Valdor, I went into his chambers to see Nimicie, who was sitting eating a sandwich dipped in a thick soup and having a tea. "Well, you're looking much better," I said with a big smile. "Valdor was just here. He said all my bones have healed, and now it's just a matter of waiting for the swelling in my face and around my spine to go away," Nimicie said with the best smile she could muster. "He also asked if he could speak to us both, and said he'd be back in a few hours." She said, "You mean I've got to sit here all day talking with you? Oh, what a horrible day," I said, chuckling. Then she punched me and laughed. For the rest of the day, I kept things light and happy with Nimicie. I didn't feel she was strong enough yet to be planning the chasing and killing of assassins. The knowledge that she would never be truly safe if we didn't, for I felt their probing her mind was not over, and they'd try this again. And I could not bring myself up to broaching the subject. At least, not yet. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure which. My good friend Valdor never seemed to have a problem with tact. He had none, plain and simple. You would think, being the king's grand vizier and surrounded by diplomats most of his life, he would learn the skills of diplomacy, but he never did. Valdor was Valdor, and if he had something on his mind, you knew about it quick, and usually in the most direct way possible. I think that's why I trusted him. That's why he was one of my greatest friends. "Oh, good. The two of you are here? So what are we going to do about these two assassins that are probably still after Nimicie?" Valdor said as he walked into his chambers. "Well, she's safe here for a few days till she heals, so we can talk about that then," I said softly and with a smile. "Is she? I don't think so. Yes, these chambers are magically sealed from portholes, but there must be 5 or 6 different chambermaids and staff in here daily, all gossiping away about Valdor's beaten horror he keeps in his bed." I stood and walked up to him. "You will watch your words, Valdor friend, or no friend, say that again, and we'll have a problem." I clearly threatened. "You brought her to me, beaten and naked, Dawn. She's wearing one of my bed shirts, and she appeared in the middle of the night. You tell me what you'd think," he said and continued. "I can stop magic from being used in these chambers, but not the whole palace, not to mention kidnappings and poisons. So, no, I don't think she's safe here, and the sooner we get her out of here, the safer she'll be," Valdor said, standing toe-to-toe with me. "Maybe you're right," I admitted. "Maybe I'm right. Maybe," he said, taking a step back and throwing his hands in the air. "I have a sister in the Redridge Mountains who has a pumpkin farm." Nimicie started to say and tried to get out of bed. "No, sweetie, you stay here. For now, I'll get you set up at my dad's place tomorrow," I said, putting her back in bed. "Meanwhile, you write down your sizes and what you want, and I'll go to the dressmaker and get it this afternoon," I said, and handed her a pad and pen Valdor had on the dresser. "Good. Now that's settled," Valdor said, walking over the foot of the bed. "Nimicie, whether you know it or not, you have a lot of magic in you. Why you're healing so fast? Anyway, I need to see something in your father's den when you were a child. I want to teach you how to thought project," Valdor said. "I never saw my father's," Valdor said. "I never saw my father's. It was always locked, I think." Nimicie said, "Well, that's good. We can work from there. Let me teach you the skill. Then if we have 2, we can use hypnosis," Valdor said, nodding. "Whoa! I'm not sure if I like this. Is it safe in her state?" I asked. "She may feel a little tired, but physically she'll be fine," Valdor said. "Dawn, my love, I want to do it," Nimicie said while taking my hand and slapping her list into my other. "And how did you know about her father's den, Valdor? That's something we didn't discuss?" I asked suspiciously. He held up the bracer I gave him and opened it and did something to the inside of it, and a beam of pinkish-purple light shot onto the bed between Nimicie's feet. And there stood a 2-foot Valdor from my world. It spoke. "If you're seeing this, you must be me, for only I would be so thorough as to look for hidden messages inside magic items. The man who gave this to you is indeed Sergeant Don Zart, Kingsguard, and my greatest friend. He has saved my life countless times, and I his, but not nearly as much. You remember how to astro project, don't you, Valdor? Professor Dixon showed us. I'll see you in my mind." The figure on the bed disappeared, and Valdor started. I spent all last night talking with myself in an astral projection, and yes, Don, or as he calls you, Sergeant, I do trust you and believe you are my friend. I walked over to him and put my hand on his shoulder. It is good to have my friend back, I said with a huge smile. Yes, when this is done, we'll have to go fishing over at Crystal Lake, he said. Oh, Valdor, I have to show you these falls in the plague lands. Yellowtail galore. I started, but was interrupted by Nimicie giving 2 quick claps. You go shop? And you teach? We looked at her, then each other. I smiled and left. On my way out of the palace, I stopped into Dad's office. Cadet Davis was there and his wife. Ah, nephew, my father said. You just caught us. We were about to leave for the orphanage. How do we look? You look like a beautiful family, I said, looking right at Davis and his wife, and slapped him on the shoulder. King's Guard and a family in one day. Huh, Ernie, you don't do anything small, do you? I chuckled. Danny, this is my wife, Irene, Davis said, smiling. I stuck out my hand, and she instead wrapped her arms around me, hugging me, and said, Thank you, my husband's invisible friend. My honor, Mum, I said and smiled, and then walked over to my dad. Uncle, a quiet word, I asked as we walked to the far side of the office. Excuse us for a second, Cadet Mum, my father said, and they both nodded. Quietly, I said to my father, Dad, I need to move our package to your house for safety. Mind if I put in an extra bed and a few woman things? I asked. You could turn the place into a woman's spa for all I care, as long as you're there when I get home, he said and continued. About the good cadets bursary, 300 gold a year, son, it's modest, but they'll get by, he said, and I nodded, but not till he passes the test, and take Davis aside and give him 20 gold from the 2 of us to get his little girl started in their home today. I said just above a whisper. Planned on it, son, Dad replied. I smiled at him and said loudly, Thank you, Uncle, then walked over to Davis and stuck out my hand and he took it. Good luck, Daddy, I said with a smile and left. I went and ordered a double bed and privacy screen to be delivered that night, then went to Canal Tailor and Fit Shop and gave Lisbeth Schneider Nimicie's list. 2 of each undergarment and 1 of everything else, please, I said. Color, sir? Black, please. Everything black. She smiled and went into the back. While she was gone, I admired a huntress outfit she had on a mannequin, black from foot to head and with built-in armor and padding. The price on it was 160 gold. I whistled in disbelief. The latest in huntress assassin wear, may I tell you about it? Lisbeth asked. Please, I said, and she came over and started. The boots are greater sealskin, waterproof and padded, warm, tough, and carry a 3-inch boot knife on each on the inner calf. The pants are buckskin, double-stitched and padded on the knees, thighs, and butt, and double-skinned on the inner thighs for riding. The belt has various loops for poisons or heels, a pouch for smoke bombs, and a small knife concealed in the buckle. The top is buckskin with mammoth bone armor and ladies' support built in, arrow and knife proof, a built-in quiver at the back, and a hoodie. The shoulder epaulets are greater tortoiseshell, completely sword and axe proof, padded on the elbows, and a mammoth bone arm guard built in on the bow arm. And finally, the bracers and gloves are again greater seal skin with mammoth bone built into the knuckles and a 6-inch spring-loaded blade in the offhand, set off by pressing your index finger to your palm. Lisbeth finished, took a breath, and smiled. Would it fit the girl on that list? I asked. She looked at the list and then the suit and then me, smiled, and said, Like a glove, sir. I pushed her gently back from the mannequin, pulled my sword, came down hard on the shoulders, and flailed and stabbed the body armor till the mannequin fell over. Sir, from an annoyed Lisbeth. I put my sword back and picked up the mannequin and inspected the outfit. Not a scratch, ding, dent, or rip anywhere. I'll take this too, please, Lisbeth, and gift wrap it, will you? I asked. Yes, sir, she said with a smile. Stopping at the empty quiver in the market, on my way home, I was glad no one knew me here. With all the packages, all I needed was a pair of high heels, and I could be the world's ugliest woman. Very happy to get home, I put Nimicie's gifts away and put on the stakes waiting for the furniture, and Dad both. Stakes were done. Half an hour later, the furniture arrived, and Dad still wasn't home by the time I put the bed together. I was getting worried when he finally came in. Where were you? Your steak is cold, I said, smiling, knowing I sounded like a wife. Oh, I couldn't possibly. I ate at the Davises, son. I am Grandpa Zart now, he said, smiling. Really? I said, and sat to listen. Well, first, we marched in, and all the kids came and hugged Irene. I guess she spent the day there the day before. Anyway, to make a long story short, the orphanage waived the fees and let Cindy go home with the Davises right away. And yes, son, we donated the fees anyway, before you ask. Then I took Davis aside and gave him the 20 gold. And he gave me back 10 and asked if I'd like to shop for furniture with Cindy and Irene. Because he was so grateful to us, we all went to the furniture store. Davis stood at the front of the store, smiling and laughing, while Cindy dragged both me and Irene around to show us what she liked, Dad said. And I stopped him for a sec to pour 2 ales and again sit and listen. So, Cindy named me Grandpa Zart, and we all went with that. Irene brought over dresses to hold in front of Cindy, and we played with the princess dollhouse. And she showed me the princess dresser and bed to match, so while Irene took her off to try on clothes, I asked Davis if he had the room, and he said she would be getting his study, so I got her all 3. Then the saleslady showed me the princess dress that went with the set, and we threw that in too. Dad said, smiling from ear to ear. I took a sip of my ale and teased him, saying, "All for 10 gold, huh?" He smiled at me and said, "Well, son, I am. Grandpa Zart, you know," and took a gulp of his ale. And that's when he noticed the bed and privacy screen sitting in the center of the apartment. "Holy cats, son, that's a big bed," he said over his owl. "No, Dad, it looks big because it's in the center of the room. Come on, Grandpa, help me clear out the far corner and set up the bed and screen over there," I said, chuckling. "Only if you help me tomorrow night, son," he said. "Do what?" I asked. He quickly said before he took another gulp of his ale, "Put together a dollhouse, dresser, and bed." I laughed and agreed, and we got to work.